Okay, got it. So I'm Liz Yoder. My title is the Director of Financial Planning at a company called Planning Across the Spectrum. And my focus is working with families and individuals to have more financial independence and more of an understanding of what a long-term plan looks like, especially when there's support needs that need to be taken into consideration for a long-term plan. So sometimes that means in-depth tax and insurance and estate conversations, and sometimes that means just trying to figure out how to make sure that bills are paid on time. And so I'm hoping to touch on a little bit of everything, and please send some questions into the chat when you see them, and I'll try to address them as I see them. I'm not 100% great at that, but I'll try and stop myself if there's something that is on topic that I can address.
And
All
Liz,
right.
I'll keep an eye on that. You don't have to worry about the chat, and I'll relay
Okay.
any questions to you as they're relevant, or we'll save a little time at the end.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I am in Edgewater, and I eventually will probably make my way over to Main Street community spaces to see people in person. But right now I'm at my home office in Edgewater, just south of Annapolis, and our office is technically in Connecticut, which is where I grew up. So today we're here to kind of talk a little bit about basic banking and money concepts, to talk about how you can maximize your own financial life, your own money, and how to plan for the future. So the first step is really financial tools. And one of the tools is just a bank account and picking a bank. There's a lot of banks out there. And depending on what you need out of a bank, you can find a bank that works for you. So this is all about, again, looking at what you need, what you like, and making sure that your bank is doing what you need it to do. For most of our young people and a lot of people that we work with who are autistic, they prefer to work with a bank that meets them where they are. Sometimes that means having a bank that has off hours or hours that that they can do banking online. Ease of deposits is a big deal, making sure that deposits and withdrawals are done in a way that's easy to manage. And that one of the biggest things is that the fees for ATM use or low transaction or low balances are either waived or taken care of by your bank. A lot of banks, and one of the biggest and most popular ones of Bank of America, for example, will charge fees on just having a small balance, and small balance could be anywhere. I don't know. I think it's like sometimes $1,000 that banks will charge a fee just to have your bank open. And that's a lot of waste, especially if your bank account is kind of moving money in and out and your balance doesn't grow very much. Personally, for me, I use a bank account that just hold money in for my monthly expenses, and then it moves out really quickly. So I don't want to be in a bank that will be, again, charging fees on just me using my bank account. So be aware of that. There are ways to find banks that minimize those kinds of ways to deplete your money faster than you actually really need it to do. There are different bank accounts. So their checking account is one of the most common. It's again where I keep most of my money for paying my bills and making sure that my credit card is paid off. And it's the most common account to deposit. It's usually free to open and often free to use, but not always. And so you want to look for those free options. And it tends to come with a debit card to use at stores and to use wherever you're going or online. Um, and often will make paying for bills easier. So if you have a savings account, it might be trickier to pull money out on a regular basis as you wish to do. A checking account would be more appropriate if it's a spending account. There's often low fees and but also lower interest on the money that's growing within the account if money is being left in the account. A savings account has the higher interest rates so that it can grow over time if there's money being saved and put in for larger purchases. And it's not typically used to pay bills or buy things as a checking account would be. And so there would be higher interest, but there's sometimes higher fees as well. If, for example, just for the permission to use the higher interests, if is one way to put it. So saving is one tool that we all kind of learn about as we develop as people, and kind of one basic principle of saving is just tracking expenses, understanding where money is going and understanding why. And now this is something that people take a long time to figure out. A lot of the time, people will get into patterns of just kind of earning money, spending money, and saving is that time where you take to really focus on what is important to you to have and what you want to do with your money, whether that be travel or a hobby that you really want to invest in, or something else like coursework that you want to participate in. Setting goals is important to kind of achieve these expenses, but it also allows you to kind of put a number on what you'll need in the future and start really being intentional about moving money towards that goal. It does take dedication and commitment, and it promotes the idea of delayed gratification. And sometimes there are tools that need to be put in place to make sure that those savings goals are met. Sometimes it means moving money into a separate account. One thing that we talk about is an emergency fund. So an emergency fund is basically a either 3 to 6 month is often what we call it, a fund that would meet all of your personal living expenses. So if you know what you're spending on a month-to-month basis on the things that you really care deeply about and to take care of yourself, whether it be rent, food, getting your transportation costs, 3 to 6 months is kind of what we'd say is an emergency fund, and the things that you like can't live without. So whether that's a true emergency or like an emotional attachment is up to you to decide whether it's in your emergency fund or not. So 3 to 6 months of your typical expenses. Taking advantage, if you can establish an emergency fund, it allows you to kind of take advantage of preparing yourself for things that might come up that you don't anticipate. So when we talk about an emergency fund, it can be in your regular bank account. It can be in your regular savings account. But we know that everybody has different levels of commitment to their goal setting. And sometimes it does make sense to establish a separate account just so that and the way we call it is mental accounting. It it puts that money somewhere other than where we usually spend money from, so that it makes it a little bit more difficult for us to spend from the things that we're saving. Um, and if you set those goals, if you put money away towards those goals every once in a while, and you put it in a place where you feel like, okay, this is really for that thing, that un- unexpected situation, or that really important trip that I've been thinking about for the past 5 years, then it's in a separate account and you have, it'll be less likely that you would pull from it for your daily expenses. Um, so saving is a practice, and it's a long-term process for all of us. Setting goals for money, setting actual dollar amount goals is one thing that you can do to really start saving. Um, Defining short-term versus longer-term goals to understand like how long it will take you to get there. Like for example, a short-term goal that I might have is to um, go out to dinner with my family. But a longer term goal might be, yeah, taking that trip to a family vacation. Um, and and knowing that I might not get on the plane to the Midwest every year, but it is something I value and it's something I want to do to see great grandparents of my my son. So that is a longer term goal, and it's something I want to make sure is there when we do plan to go. And if income is an issue, if you haven't established yourself in a way to really have this ability to save very much, um, using goal setting is important to really conceptualize saving to start the process, because in the future there is a chance that you would have money and that you want to have those practices in place to be comfortable with keeping that money for the things that you need it for. I will talk about able accounts a little bit later, but an able account in a lot of ways is um, a long-term savings account and an emergency account. Some people do use it as a regular a spending account, and it's just based on kind of what your needs are for what the able account is doing for you, but also what your practices are as well. So the able could really be, um, again, something put aside that maybe not as easy to use as a checking account. Um, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I certainly consider an able account to be a unique type of savings account.
Thank,
And I'll address your actual specific question when we get further along.
thank you.
Yeah. Um, Writing checks is another big one. It's not something that comes up very often anymore, but we still do need to write checks every once in a while. So being able to track um, that money that's spent in a way that you aren't surprised when you have a low balance in your bank account. Um, Track everything that you write in a check, and everything that comes out of your debit card in your checkbook to make sure that you're aware of where your money is going, and that you're able to account for it. The biggest thing that writing checks is good for these days is usually that the rent, utilities, and sometimes taxes, the semi-annual things that creep up on you. So you want to have like an understanding and comfort level of using a checkbook, um, so that you're familiar with those kind of one-time bigger expenses that can sometimes come, um, and aren't kind of your typical day-to-day. Um, experiences. Now, rent can be a monthly thing, but you want to make sure that that you'll have money in your bank account when rent is due, that you're able to write that check when it's before it's due, and make sure it's delivered on time as needed. So making sure that you have things set up in your schedule, reminders in your calendar to make sure that rent is being paid in the way that it needs to be. But then it's being tracked in your checkbook or your check register. Um, Again, paying bills is necessary skill for any kind of independent living. Um, Even if you aren't fully responsible for all of your expenses, you can still take ownership of some piece of your financial lives to make sure that you are getting that practice, because the practice of even taking care of the littlest things like the Netflix bill, or like the going out for lunch once in a while, um, not only does it like empower you to just like have ownership of it, but it also does build the comfort level of being able to manage some of that stuff going forward. So even these small steps of doing some small management can really help in the future if you are needing to do more and more of that. And doing more and more of that is the goal, certainly, of being more independent and able to take care of things for yourself. Um, all right. So credit cards are a kind of a tough conversation for some. A lot of people have some anxiety around credit, partially for one, because um, the credit is something that's easy to kind of get away from you. To use a card without kind of thinking about what money is there to pay for the expenses. But a credit history is really important if you want to rent a house, if you want to buy a car, if you want to have some financial flexibility with any kind of loan. A credit history will be important. So again, using a credit card safely is really important to building that credit history that you have on file, that you're responsible and that you're making payments on time. But the biggest things about making a credit history healthy is, again, like making sure you're paying on time, that you're not overutilizing your credit. Overutilizing credit means using more than 30% of what credit is being offered to you. So if you have a credit card that has a $5,000 limit to it, you should really be only using a smaller portion of that, and only very rarely going anywhere beyond really $2,000 a month, held for any much longer of a time. It's not that you have a blank check of 5,000. It's that in an emergency, you can get $5,000 to pay for something that should be paid back as soon as possible. One thing that, before I go on to the next slide, just because a bill comes due to you from a credit card company, then that says your minimum balance is due, doesn't mean that that's actually what's due. It is what's due, but you're being charged an interest rate if you keep anything over zero on the card. So if you're paying the credit card company to keep a balance, and the most that you could put into the credit card payment that is helpful to you to have your cash flow work is probably what you should be putting into the credit card for a payment, not just the $25 credit card minimum, but possibly paying off the full credit card or a couple $100 at a time if that's feasible for your budget. When you get a positive credit history, that means that, again, you'll have a lot of options for borrowing money in the future, for moving to different homes that are kind of helpful in either like nice apartment buildings or apartment buildings that are managed well, because they want to make sure that you are going to be a responsible resident. They'll want to make sure that you can handle the things that are expected of you as a renter. One final thing before I go on to the next slide. Use the auto pay options. You can set up the auto pay to make sure that your credit card is at least paid at the minimum balance that is due by the due date. And that way you're not paying late on your credit card ever. And then if you want to pay off the credit card monthly, that you go in and do that whenever you're comfortable. But if the auto pay is set up and you have a crazy month and you just can't get to paying your bill, well, then the bill's paid to the amount that's due and you don't have a late fee on it. You're just going to be paying the rest of your balance and moving on. I've met with many people who say that auto pay has not only been really helpful, but some people will say it saved their life to like being able to manage things in the way that really removed that mental stress, that mental drain on being aware of when the due date was, being stressed that you were going to miss it, various different things. Just set up auto pay, make sure the minimum gets paid. And then if you're going to pay off more, then do that whenever you want. You can set a time, but if it's on auto pay, you just don't have to worry about it. You don't have to spend that mental energy thinking about it. Okay. Many of you I know are employed, some might not be, but this is one option of a pay stub. When you're reviewing your pay stub, look at withholdings or taxes and other employee benefits. If your company does offer benefits, make sure you understand what they are and what you can elect into. And use the pay stub to really make spending and savings goals. So for example, so this pay stub here shows that there's some taxes here. That's the federal withholding. There's the Social Security payment that you would pay into to enroll in your own Social Security benefits for retirement or even SSDI if you're eligible for SSDI. And Medicare payment, that's typically for the retirement benefit at 65, but it's going to Medicare regardless. So it might be received prior to as well. But these are going to be standardized across the board based on your income and that they're a standard. Everybody is paying Medicare, Social Security, and some amount of federal or state withholding. So for the most part, there's rare exceptions. If you're working for different government positions, then you might not have one of these withholdings. So this is employer taxes. So this is just kind of another thing that you might see come out. There would be, now when we're looking at kind of, if you're still considering your earnings for Social Security purposes, you do want to always look at the gross amount and not the net amount. So the gross amount is what your full earnings will be, and that's what Social Security is looking at. The net amount is just what you've paid in taxes and other benefits that you're eligible for. Social Security will be looking at this, the full amount that the taxes and everything else will be separate. Like it doesn't matter that you've paid the taxes. It's they expect you to if you're working. So um, just one thing to be mindful of if you're still on benefits or if you're considering getting onto Social Security at some point. Um, okay, so this is another kind of piece of information to get comfortable with if you're working with, even if I'm jumping ahead. You might have healthcare benefits from work. You might have healthcare benefits from Medicare or Medicaid. And any company will kind of give you an explanation of benefits. When you get this from the mail, usually um, the insurance company will send you a report of what services you received, and they'll be coded in all kinds of weird ways. You'll be like, I didn't get surgery, but that's how they're coding it. Whatever doctor service that you used, and they'll have all these numbers of what the charges were. The doctor will have claimed some amount of what will be used. The ineligible amount would be what the insurance would not pay, or and then there's some elements of copay or policy deductible. So each element is saying basically what the doctor's asking for, what they can ask for, what the insurance policy is paying for, and what you may be eligible to pay or may be required to pay. This one says that the patient is required to pay the full amount. Now, it doesn't mean that that's your bill. That just means that this insurance policy, the United Healthcare Insurance Company, isn't covering that cost. The doctor's office might waive the bill depending on what your personal situation is. This also might not be your only insurance company. This might be your private insurance company. You might have like one or two other insurances that this has to go through before you actually get a bill from the doctor. So the explanation of benefits is a piece of support of your healthcare that you'll want to spend a little bit of time with, but be aware that this is not your bill. And when you're able to work in service, and when you're able to get healthcare work from doctors who provide care within your health insurance, the majority of these costs could be covered. So make sure when you're learning about what your health insurance is, that you review how your doctors are looking at your health insurance. Sometimes they're enrolled in your health insurance payment plan, and sometimes they're not. So that's a communication that you can have with your doctor, with your insurance company. They can tell you what doctors use, your insurance plan, and you can use you can use your insurance company to educate you on where you should be going for different services, especially if it's a new doctor that you're going to be looking for a specialist, or your doctor retires or whatever. Your insurance company can be there to help you understand who to go to next. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So there are a lot of benefits that companies can offer as far as addition to your regular payment. So they can offer health insurance. They can offer sometimes housing or transportation assistance. They can offer retirement plans, insurance policies, and stock options. So depending on where you are, I'm assuming that like the Kennedy Center isn't going to be offering stock options. They just aren't a publicly traded business, for example. However, They might offer these other things. And when you get a um, disability policy, this is just one thing to note. Anyone can be approved to receive a disability policies from a employer. Not all will get a medical evaluation, and most don't. But if you have to step back from work because of kind of what you're experiencing with your priorly diagnosed disability, then the disability coverage would not step in to make payments for you. This would be kind of like if something were to happen at work, and there's new medical information, they would pay out a portion of your salary in that event. So if you have new migraines, or if you have if you have an injury and you have to take a step back, if you have something else that's new that comes up, that's when the disability policy would step in. Sometimes, so if you're on Social Security, it's always important to be aware of when you're able to put money into a 401k and when you're not. Typically, you aren't completely restricted from saving for retirement if you are using benefits, but you do want to know the rules. So I'll go over a couple of them in a little bit, but of having access to a 401k does not necessarily mean that you can be using it if you want to maintain your benefits. But there are ways to use a 401k while still on benefits. You just have to be on the right program. And I'll go through that a little bit in the future. Okay. So reducing financial stress. This is one thing that we all have anxiety around, kind of what will the future be? One of the things that we can do to reduce financial stress is to budget. But by budgeting, I don't mean being so by the book that anything that you do outside of your budget is a cause for concern. So certainly if you make a budget and you're not meeting it, there's something to look at there. That maybe there's some behaviors or priorities that you need to really examine and see if what you truly want is what your budget suggests. We don't want a budget to be a higher, cause higher anxiety than to resolve anxiety. So in order for a budget to resolve anxiety, we suggest that people look at what they're spending and just evaluate if what you're spending is aligned with your goals. And if your goals are to be spending time with friends and family and to be comfortable in the life that you have, then make sure that how you're spending that money isn't being pulled away by other things that you don't care as much about. Certainly meeting your financial obligations, making sure that you're saving for an emergency account so that if something were to happen that you're able to take care of it. But make sure that you're building the budget of the life that you want. So some things to keep in mind as a 50-30-20 rule. So 50% of income is often on needs, on the things that need to happen: housing, groceries, insurance, utilities, transportation, childcare, minimum payments, etc. So 50% I should be on needs. If there's more than 30% of wants, we're getting into maybe some too much wants, too many wants, and 20% into saving and future planning. I think that this 50-30-20 rule, it can be hard to establish, but once it's established, it doesn't add on that complexity of, oh, I'm spending too much on coffee this month. I'm spending too little on groceries, whatever it is that like is a need versus a want. As long as you know this is a need and this is a want, and can kind of scale back the wants when the needs aren't getting met. That's the biggest thing. Don't nitpick on why X, Y, and Z is happening. Just know that the needs are going to be priority. The wants are certainly, you want to have the life that you want, and then that there should be some left for savings. And if the needs are a higher proportion of your budget, then be aware of how much you're spending on your wants, because it's going to be difficult to have all your wants if your needs aren't being met. All right. So emergency funds are just essentially important. And this is, again, coming from the be prepared mindset, protect your emotional health by having a little bit of extra set aside so that if something were to happen, you need your car repaired, if you need to visit the emergency room, if you need to take a step away from work for some time, that there's some money there for you to have what you need, even for a short amount of time. And it could, yeah. Certainly how to build an emergency fund, it's whatever works for you, but just starting small and increasing to your comfort level is always a good way to begin. So rounding up the change, making sure that if you're looking at your bills and you say, okay, I have this much left over, just put that much left over. In the previous slide, we said 30% for wants and 20% needs. If you have $5 left over, you can spend the $3 on what you want and the $2 for emergency fund. It's a slow go, but if you have more than that, then start increasing as you see fit, and as you're comfortable. Okay. So cutting expenses is going to be difficult, but there are some easy ways to do it. If you aren't using all of your subscriptions, get rid of them. Stop paying for those things. Make sure you cancel in the appropriate way, but make sure that, like, if you have Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu, what are you actually focused on? How much time are you spending on each platform? And can you kind of, because it's streaming, can you dedicate some time on one and then move to the other? Or just creative ways like that. You don't have to be spent, if you're not spending your time, you shouldn't be spending your resources as well on the services that you aren't using. Consider renegotiating your bills. Sometimes a call to the cable company will get you a smaller bill. One of my boss loves to call Comcast for people because it's where he can be his angriest. He can vent and let out his steam at the Comcast people for not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but it is something that you can do, is have a call with a company to see if there's a way to lower the service or change things so that it's more affordable to you. If they're not fulfilling an obligation, see how they can adjust their billing. And avoiding purchases like getting lunch out all the time when you go to work, it can make a significant impact. Doing some lunch prep for the week ahead can help reduce that financial need. I'm gonna go quickly on these last bits because I wanted to get to a little bit more of some detail. But spending wisely, using coupons, cashback services are really helpful, and using price matching when there's coupons or other services that do that price match is going to be helpful to reduce expenses as well. Avoiding scams is a big one. So just be aware, there are scammers out there. They are looking for people to kind of trick and to get money from. No one is going to be asking for your password to anything ever. So don't give it to them. When you get a call from a company that's asking for your social security number or for remote access to your computer, it's highly unlikely that they need it. And so just keep moving along unless it's the Social Security Administration giving you a call, unless it's there and you just know that you've had an appointment with the Social Security. They won't call you otherwise. They don't have the time. So just be aware that there are going to be scammers out there who are looking to make quick money on someone who thinks that they're legitimate. Just if you're suspicious of something, just put it aside and deal with it another time. Okay, so planning for the future. I know that many of you are saying that like saving at anything at all is a hard thing. So how are we even looking at a long-term retirement plan? It's a good question, but it's also one that is just, you want to start slow on doing small savings and making sure that you are meeting your needs and that your wants are coming into it and that you're saving for the unknowns. Your employer can offer support with some of these things. But yeah, see, sometimes they have legal teams that they'll have on their benefit package. So be aware that sometimes they'll have services that you can use for free to have some of your questions answered. Okay. So I wanted to touch on Social Security because I know some people may be on it, some people may not, but I wanted to kind of cover the big picture things. So SSI is going to be the most restrictive income program. SSI is that $841 check a month if you're paying rent to someone. It requires low income and low assets, and the low income has to be that substantial gainful activity amount, which is below $1350 a month without any other reductions in income for the purpose of being discounted from Social Security. SSDI is going to be that higher dollar amount that's coming in from Social Security, and that's from either your own work history of working enough credits to earn your Social Security disability income, or from your parents' work history when they retire, become disabled, or pass away. And that's called the Disabled Adult Child Benefit. I'm going to skip ahead here. So the two programs, SSI and SSDI, are pretty well linked to the two health insurance programs of Medicaid and Medicare. Medicare, again, is that national health insurance program. Medicaid is going to be the state-based one. And everybody is going to have, Medicaid has the income restriction and the asset restriction. Medicare does not. So in Maryland, The EID is the Employed Individuals with Disabilities Program. It's a program of Medicaid that allows people who are working to have a higher asset and income cap. So as someone who is enrolled in the EID program, and that enrollment happens, I believe it's annually with the kind of 6-month check-ins every once in a while, check in to see if you're still working or intending to work. But then it discounts your income to that $73,000 a year, and your assets can be $10,000 a year, and maintain your Medicaid eligibility. So that's a big deal for people who have medical needs and are hoping to work. There are ways to work and maintain Medicaid eligibility. When on the EID program, people can enroll in retirement plans. And so that's just something to be aware of, that the retirement plans, the 401ks, are then no longer countable as a resource. So if you're working and your employer offers a retirement plan, you don't have to waive it just because you're on Medicaid, as long as you're enrolled in this program. And that you're aware that the Social Security will count the 401k if it's SSI, but SSDI also does not count resources. So if you are on SSDI and this program of Medicaid, your Medicaid will stay in place, your Social Security will stay in place. Okay. This is where with Enable, you can save as much money as you want to, and it will always be available to you. So as long as you're within the contribution limits of the ABLE. So the ABLE this year, you can contribute $16,000 without working, and $28,880 while working. And next year, the ABLE contribution increases to $17,000. The able to work contribution, I've not seen the increase there yet. They just announced the adjustment, that extra $1,000 that you can put into the ABLE last week. So I haven't seen the new regulations on the able to work contribution limit, but it should be similar, close to that 29,000 that currently people who are working can put into an ABLE. As long as someone has an ABLE, has a disability that was determined to have started before the age of 26, someone's able to open an ABLE and fund it. There's no tax impact to taking out money from the ABLE. There are ways to invest and grow the money within the ABLE. Of course, investing can lead to decrease in value and not just an increase in value. So be aware of that. If you're looking for a short-term savings account, maybe thinking about it as save more conservatively than aggressively. That's one thing to be aware of. But when held in an ABLE account, the Medicaid and SSI are protected from being counted as a resource. Okay. I'm going to skip ahead a couple more times. And if we have questions, we can go through a little bit more. So other income-driven programs, if you are of low income, include SNAP, the housing support programs. Montgomery County, again, will have the program is you are eligible for the program if you earn less than $63,000 as a single person and $72,000 as a married household. And living with friends and family is always a benefit that people can choose to have to reduce their living expenses. So just something to not always thought of as a benefit, but it certainly is a cost reducing choice that people can make. I'm gonna go through this really quickly, but I want to cover this, and yeah, I will certainly make sure that the slides are available. I'll make sure that Stacy gets them and that she can send it around. Um, Making sure that you're building your circle of support on your own terms. So one of the things that we always want to cover is that having a disability does not mean that you need benefits necessarily. There's certainly a help for people who need them. Medical benefits are going to be primarily the ones that we want to make sure are protected as much as we can. Income benefits, if you can work, you can work. So if those aren't as important to you and you can structure your employment in the way that it is providing as much or more than Social Security, you certainly want to evaluate how that will work out. Um, the EID, that working disabled program for Medicaid, is really strong and is compelling to keep Medicaid, because it does increase those limits so much. And if health insurance is a concern for you, keeping Medicaid, where it's going to be a free or very low cost program, it may be worth it to keep Medicaid and to continue on that EID program. But for others who are working, the path may be that they drop benefits in the future, and that's okay. So you just want to make clear what your goals are and what your capacity to maintain employment will be, and to make sure that you have a cushion so that when those income streams from benefits are lost, that you can kind of mimic that from the savings that you have and from the new income that you'll have by pursuing more competitive employment. Staying on benefits is a personal, medical, and financial choice. And we want to make sure that people know that. Many people do stay on benefits all of their life, but not everyone needs to. And that is a conversation that needs to receive a lot of input and advice. But there's a lot of good things that can come from benefits, not just health and income, but supported networks and making sure that people have those home and community-based supports that are valuable to people. Identify the supports that you need. Not every support is going to be from folk rehab centers and the systems that the state has provided for you. Benefits can include, or not benefits, but supports can include family, friends, spouses, children, handy people, house cleaners, coaches, designers to make sure your home is working the way it needs to, financial planners, attorneys, caregivers, and social workers. They all are part of your team. We have this joke: I don't understand how the stock market works. And at this point, I'm afraid to ask. And that's why if you have the opportunity to invest, that you would use professional. And if you have other questions that you're too afraid to ask, that there are professionals that are out there to support you with answering those questions. And finally, legal and estate planning. Some of you will have needs for doing legal planning, especially if you have an able account or if you're not on benefits and you have assets. You'll want to make sure that you're discussing with your loved ones who would be receiving that money once you're gone. If you have, and we're always assuming that it's going to be a long, long life, but we always want to make sure that you have communicated with the people who you love what your intentions are. If there is an accident or something that you can't be there to inform them what you want those conversations to be clear for the people who love you. And I'm gonna kind of end there. It's a lot. And I'm sorry there wasn't enough time for too many questions. I am happy to stay on a little bit longer for those of you who can stay longer. But I know that it's also 1 o'clock and past the time that we had scheduled. So I'm going to go back to the question. If you ever move to another country, can you transfer your ABLE to a new savings account into a bank in whatever country you choose to live in? So that's kind of, and I know that this question was asked by someone who's not on the call anymore. There's a lot to international trade regulations. It may make more sense to just leave it where it is and to continue using it, but it also depends on what country, what the trade laws are, what the tax laws are, and if they're they work with each other, because some will be favorable to continuing to use the account and some will, not. And it depends on also why you want the account in the first place. If you're protecting benefits that you may need in the future, if there's a different program in the other country, it really depends on kind of what the needs are and what the desire is there, and what the international trade law looks like. So that's an unknown currently. Anything else that's come up for people?
This was really so informative and helpful. And there were also some other really great pieces of advice in the chat. And I just wanted to say thank you. We have been recording this session, and we are going to make sure that we send out the recording. And then Liz said she would share the slides. So I'll make sure that everybody who joined us today is able to access those. We really appreciate it and your time, Liz. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you, Liz.
Does
Thanks, I learned a lot.
anybody else have any other questions? She said she'd stay on to answer if you do have something to ask. And that's okay if you don't.
No.
All right, see everyone later. Bye.
Okay,
Thank
bye.
you all for
so much.
coming and for staying the whole
Cheerio.
time.